thanks to the organizers for inviting us here to present our statement on sustainable development, gene technology, and the food system. My name is Håvard, as Trygve said, and I work as a senior advisor in the secretariat of the Norwegian Biotechnology Advisory Board. It's a mouthful, so henceforth I will just say the board. What I'm going to talk about is just give you a very brief overview of what the board is, how it works. Talk a little bit about GMO, the food system, but I will try to focus my presentation on sustainability and relevant policies and give you a couple of examples of what we are actually talking about before concluding. So what is the Norwegian Biotechnology Advisory Board? Well, it is a board appointed by the government where the mandate is like advising authorities, informing the public, and creating debates all about ethical and societal questions regarding the use of modern biotechnology. And we can coarsely divide it between use within, in humans and use of biotechnology in animal, plants, and microorganisms. And in the Norwegian legislation, this split is it's reflected in the legislation in two different acts: the Biotechnology Acts, which regulates the use in humans, and the Gene Technology Acts, regulating gene technology in animal, plants, and microorganisms. So, the board has these two laws are. We have a special focus in the board. So the board is made up by 15 members and 5 deputy members, and they are appointed for a 4-year period. This is the current board, and the eagle-eyed viewers among you may recognize a face. Trygve is our deputy chairman of the board. So, just very briefly, what is a genetically modified organism, or a GMO? It is it is a big discussion about what it actually is. And just to briefly touch on the discussion, it is it's kind of like two camps about how to answer this, and this is also reflected in the legislation globally. The green countries all has a legislation stating that something like a GMO is something that contains foreign genes. Some kind of genes have been added somehow, and that would be like countries like the US, Canada, Argentina, China, and so forth. While the red countries, they all would have some sort of definition going towards the lines like, well, a GMO is something, is an organism made with gene technology. So there's a difference here about what a GMO is, dependent on where you are in the world. So, but since we are in Norway, I am Norwegian, I am a part of the Norwegian Advisory Board, I will henceforth use the Norwegian definition. So just also very briefly on the food system, it is a very complex system. This is just the center of it, the value chain, like production on farms, fish farms. We have processing, trade, and consumption. That is kind of like the big steps in the value chain. All of these are connected in different ways, and one change in, for instance, consumption patterns can affect production indirectly through the steps of trade and processing. So we have a system with the possibility of quite wide impacts when you're doing a change. So it's complex. All right. Sustainability. Often when we talk about sustainability in the public debate, it's referred to the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. And these are the 17 goals. I assume you are familiar with them. However, these goals didn't come in a vacuum. They are built on a long tradition within the United Nations, and there's also a long literature going at least back into the 18th century about sustainability. And like, even though the United Nations have somewhat of a coherent concept of sustainable development, that is not necessarily the reflection of the literature. But so what does the United Nations mean by sustainable development? Well, in 2005, they actually decided on a model of sustainable development, where the model is based on 3 pillars: environment, economy, and social equality. And all these 3 pillars should be weighted in a balanced manner. So, and this is a kind of an important distinction, as many environmental agencies would maybe, well, they would argue that environment is is more important than social equality and economy. Like, you can't eat money. So if we don't have an environment, what is the point with money? That would be that kind of line of reasoning. But the United Nations decided it should be balanced. We should, all these 3 pillars should be equally weighted. And also, the United Nations is known for the Brundtland Commission in the concept of sustainable development, where they published reports, Our Common Future, back in 1987, and like the most famous part of that report is the definition of sustainable development. Sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is kind of the United Nations trying to combine 2 fundamental ideas, or 2 commitments they have a long-standing tradition for, and that is economical development of the global south, and it is the commitment towards the environment. All right. Zooming back into 2021, the United Nations had a food summit where they kind of took stocks on how is the food system faring, and basically all the trends are going the wrong way, and they are going quite fast the wrong way. So they agreed on 5 action tracks on how to get the food system back on track towards a situation where the food system is contributing to sustainable development. It is ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all, shift to sustainable consumption patterns, boost nature-positive production, advance equitable livelihoods, and build resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. Unfortunately, the food system the food summit wasn't able to make more operationalized goals, policy goals. So they are meeting this year to try to continue on their work. However, in Europe and Norway, we do have policy documents stipulating some goals that are operationalizable. And some of the policy goals in EU and Norway that is of importance for the food system regarding sustainable development is reducing the use of pesticides. It is decreasing the use of antibiotics, reduction of food loss and waste, reduced use of chemical fertilizers, improved animal welfare, and healthy and safe and tasty food. And these goals I just mentioned, these are goals that is possible to address through gene technology by introducing new traits into genetically modified organisms. We're talking about traits like increasing resilience towards pests, towards infections, changing cosmetic traits. It might seem like a superficial trait, but changing the cosmetics of, for instance, an apple will maybe prolong the shelf life of the apple. So there are many different traits that can address some of the policy goals regarding sustainable development of the food system. And in this document, this statement from the board. It was used 8 examples where it was directly linked, each example, to a policy goal. And I would just like to briefly mention the late blight potato. It has been a research goal in Norway, trying to develop a potato that is resistant to late blight, that is a fungal infection that is causing quite big economic losses in the potato industry. And it has also a history of being an agent of famine. We're talking about the 19th century famine of Ireland, where late blight basically caused the biological background for that famine. And also I would like to highlight non-browning apples. It seems so trivial, non-browning apples, but when you're thinking about it, apples are quite fragile fruits. Only small bumps will give them a bruise, and they will then be thrown out and not used. And both of these two traits can be introduced by a simple knockout of one singular gene, or in the case of late blight potato, we're talking about a couple or more. So we are talking about relative small genetic changes with possibly big impacts. However, that is what is meant. That's the intention behind the technology. And in order to know what kind of side effects that are following the genetic changes, well, one have to look at the concrete application and look at this at a case-by-case analysis, because side effects can happen with the use of this technology, and that can't be assessed before you actually have the concrete application in front of you. So just to try to conclude and give you a little quote from the statement, used correctly, gene technology will contribute to a more sustainable food system in Norway and the rest of the world. So that's something to ruminate over during the coffee break.